The second season of the S Word podcast, The Sustainable Hotel, is all about sustainability and hospitality and how you realize more success by communicating your hotel's sustainability initiatives in a sustainable way. Visit thesustainablehotel.com to discover free tools, guides, templates, resources, and much more to guide your hotel in implementing sustainability in a holistic and impactful way. Welcome back to the fourth. Oh, we're already at the fourth?
Yeah,
Ooh,
incredible.
okay. The fourth episode of the S Word podcast, The Sustainable Hotel. First of all, thank you so much for being here today. It means a lot to us that you are joining our sustainability journey. In last week's episode, you'll remember we discussed sustainable communication, or how to communicate. We touched upon the 10 principles of sustainable communication. And in this week's episode, we're excited to discuss the what to communicate. Yes, sustainable communication and sustainability communication are not the same thing, but they are a similar concept and depend on each other for success.
Yeah.
So if you haven't yet heard last week's episode, it's best to start there. So maybe just go back to episode 3 and take a listen, because today we're going to be focusing on answering some questions that we frequently get asked about sustainability and sustainable communication in regards to how to communicate. So onwards in this episode.
Love it, Natasha. You mentioned that today we have the chance to answer some questions we get asked over and over again. I'm happy to start with one. And the question is, does it pay off for my hotel to communicate my sustainability actions? Now, as sustainability communication must follow action, I assume that you are on your sustainability journey already. Also, you're listening to this podcast, which is a good indication that you are. So, why aren't you fully reaping the rewards of being a good hotel? So many hotels and businesses out there are greenwashing, claiming things that aren't true or only a bit true. And I mean, your hotel that is putting in the effort is green hashing or not communicating your sustainability efforts. Don't do this. I mean, use the opportunity to communicate your sustainability activities in a strategic, sustainable, and professional way, and you will benefit greatly. More and more studies show that travelers are searching for sustainable accommodations, and as a recent sustainability report from Booking.com shows, 49% of travelers still believe there aren't enough sustainable hotel alternatives out there. Therefore, if you ask me, should I invest time, resources to communicate my sustainability actions, and you are already investing in sustainability initiatives at your hotel or even at your other business, I mean, it's yes, yes, and yes. It pays off to be a sustainable hotel in so many ways. And we scientifically prove and back it up in every single one of our handbooks. But you can benefit so much more from your sustainability activities if you are communicating them properly and sharing the right information.
For sure. And here's another important fact that I thought was very interesting, Lena. 42% of online sustainability claims were found to be exaggerated, false, or deceptive. And this
Crazy.
was found in a high-profile study by the European Commission. So this just goes to show what you communicate matters.
Yeah.
But in order to know what to communicate, you have to know your hotel sustainability story first. And from my work experience doing PR for hotels around the world, I can say knowing your sustainability storytelling makes all the difference.
Yeah.
Working with the media and various stakeholders is so important. And it's important that when you work with them, you repeat your story over and over again. That's why you clearly explain why you're doing what you're doing and that you inspire others to do it as well. Not only with your successes, but it's important to mention your failures as well. Don't you agree, Lena?
Yeah. And I mean, if you get your sustainability storytelling right, the opportunity is huge. You can attract more and importantly, the right clients. You can ask for premium prices. The list goes on. Of course, it's always the same. To tell your story, you have to define it first. Most hotels simply don't have one. But to support you in doing so, we have created a free PDF that guides you through the 3 steps to creating your unique and authentic sustainability story. Let's go over it. Why don't we?
Yes, please.
The first step, get to the heart of your story. And that's like a research work where you note down answer to questions like, how long has your hotel been on the sustainability journey? What inspired you to start the journey? What is your sustainability destination, your goal? What's your guiding compass, aka your purpose, and so on? Write it down, collect your answers. You should have enough to work with and pull from crafting your story. The second step is to take that information and create a sustainability statement. Your sustainability statement is like your sustainability elevator pitch. It describes at a high level and in a few sentences what your hotel sustainability journey is all about. And just like your elevator pitch, the statement should be familiarized by all your employees to share externally with your hotel audiences. Your sustainability statement addresses the following points: who you are, what your purpose is, why you do it, what you do, and how you achieve your purpose.
Maybe it would help if you shared Map's elevator pitch. We would love to hear that as an example. I always think it's great to put an example in for the listeners.
Okay, let's do so. Now, we start with who. At MAP Boutique Consultancy, we add our purpose. We work to make this planet a more purposeful and hospitable place for all. Why? Inspired to create change in a traditional industry and believing in the power of people. What? We seek to empower the change makers, the innovators, and forward thinkers in making hotels that do good and stand out on the map. How? We therefore guide independent and boutique hoteliers to make their hotels more innovative and sustainable and to work towards a better future for all while delivering long term sustainable success. We achieve this by equipping hoteliers with the insights, tools, and resources they need to implement sustainability and offering a fresh approach to consulting that walks them through sustainability step by step, breaking it down into what it means for their operations in a clear, accessible, and practical way.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and I mean, that was now the whole statement we have, but with your elevator pitch, it can be 2, 3 sentences. The important thing is that everybody at your hotel feels it and is able to share it. Now, you have created this first statement, and now, as we did in our previous statement, you can add color to your statement. Like, what differentiates your sustainability strategy? What makes it special and impactful? Here, you can also adjust the statement to your various stakeholders, your employees, guests, partners, the local community members. And we recommend to follow the know, feel, do model. What do you want them to know? How do you want them to feel? And what actions do you want them to take? Therefore, adapt your statement accordingly to each audience and fill it out more so you have more to draw from your communication. Last point here. Because we mentioned at the beginning of the episode we are answering questions we are getting often asked. I have another one. If I communicate my hotel sustainability efforts, will it turn off potential guests who are not so interested in sustainability and do not want to be impacted by, for example, the higher prices we charge due to the increased sustainable investments we make or the change in guest experience? Here's our answer. This might be a tough truth. Guests don't really care what you have to say. They do not. They only care about how it impacts them. Therefore, go back to the no feel do model. What do you want them to know? Focus on the positives. When you remember the 10 principles of communication, of sustainable communication we shared in last episode, always stay positive, stay authentic, and also make them clear that very often you might not even have to communicate everything as it does not impact them in some part of the communication, but in your sustainability report, what Natasha mentioned. So let's say if you raised your prices, exactly why you did it and what benefits they'll experience. For example, if you've raised your prices in order to provide your hotel staff with above industry average pay, then they can expect above and beyond guest service due to your employees being happier and more satisfied in their work. Most people are decent and good at heart. So if they hear this, they'll want to stay with you because they know that's a win win. That people and planet win by your sustainability efforts, and they win too by having an amazing stay.
So I'll give you an example from my work.
Yeah.
So the sustainability story of our client Andrew Dixon, who is also sharing his insights and learnings in the Sustainable Hotel Handbook Communication,
Yeah.
which we're bringing out soon, is unique in that the hotel does not position itself as a sustainable hotel. Going back to your question where you were saying, are guests going to be turned off because
Yeah.
we're communicating
Exactly.
sustainability? No, you don't even have to position yourself in that way. They are a barefoot type of vibe, and sustainability is such an integral part of how the hotels, both Nicoya Island and Chempendak, were built. And the way that they operate is also just incredibly sustainable, and they don't need to brag about it. It's
Yeah.
something that if you look for the information, it's there, but it's not at the top of their communication strategy.
Yeah, and you know that we discovered a recent study that the most sustainable brands are not mentioning sustainable on
Mm,
their websites all too often. But the less sustainable a brand is, the more they mention it.
yeah,
So that's also, if
yeah,
you feel you have to mention it very often,
yeah,
maybe you should check
yeah.
on how sustainable you truly are.
That's an interesting point. And going back
Yeah,
to Andrew and his hotels, so they work on lowering their carbon emissions for their guests every single year, and they're reducing it year by year. However, I just recently learned that the ferry that transports the guests to the island emits more CO2 than a guest during their entire stay.
crazy.
So you just have this external transport element that comes in that, you know, guests need to get to the hotel, but the hotel actually doesn't directly impact. It's a third scope essentially
Yeah.
of carbon emissions. But I love how they educate their guests in a fun and interactive way. And they have things like sustainability tours for kids on Nikoi. That's something they don't brag about again until the guests are actually there and immersed in the experience. So I think that's a really great way of how to communicate sustainability.
Yeah.
When we discuss the story with the media, the real differentiator is the fact that sustainability sits at the core of what both Chempendak and Nicoya Island do. They source local materials to build the properties. They hired local people to build the properties. They designed the rooms in a way that uses the sea breeze rather than installing air conditioning for cooling. So it's just a
Yeah.
very well-rounded concept. But when we share it with guests, we focus on the beauty of the islands, the nature, everything that is being done to preserve the nature, the locally grown and sourced food, and all of those elements. So you just have to differentiate between what you're telling guests versus what you're telling the media and other stakeholders because they might want to hear different stories. And all stories are true, but they're just focused on different angles. So our advice for listeners is that sometimes it's not the story itself that is the interesting part, but the story behind the story, something personal, something that creates connection and emotion.
So insightful, Natasha. And I mean, once you've shared the story about these two islands in Indonesia, so both islands from this very inspirational hotelier Andrew Dixon are in Indonesia, and also here we will put the websites in the show notes so that you can have a look how they successfully really communicate sustainability. And I allow myself to add another advice. Referring back to the last episode, it is make sure your story practices sustainable communication. Remember the 10 principles of sustainable communication we presented last week, like authenticity, relevance, transparency? Please do go through the principles one by one and make sure you can check them off when reading and communicating your story.
Wonderful. So let's wrap up this episode with the main learnings from today. One of the key learnings is that sustainability communication is the what you communicate, which means you have sustainability storytelling in place. And how do you create your sustainability story? First, you get to the heart of your sustainability activities by collecting answers to some key questions. Second, you create a sustainability statement that ensures you have one strong message in it. And last but not least, you add color to your sustainability story. Identify what makes it truly you and how it differentiates you from your competition. In this last step, you can also adjust it to various stakeholders, be it guests, employees, like I mentioned, just be sure to tailor your messaging according to who you're targeting.
Yeah.
And we mentioned it in the episode already, but we have a free PDF that you can download, and that will walk you through step by step in writing your hotel sustainability strategy in a short
Yeah.
and practical way. You'll end up with a clear and concrete sustainability story from which you can build your communication future. And you'll find the link to the download in the show notes, of course. And we recommend you working through it in this week because next week we'll tell you what to do with your story once it's written.
Exciting. So there is nothing else to say then. Bye bye. Stay tuned for more. Please do subscribe to this podcast on your favorite channel to get notified when the next episode goes online and discover how to communicate your story internally and externally. Thank you so much for joining us on the journey to build a more hospitable and purposeful planet together. Onwards!
Onwards. The second season of the S Word podcast, The Sustainable Hotel, is all about sustainability and hospitality